and we'll get underway. So hello everyone, and welcome to the Arapahoe Library's Parenting Strategies series. I'm Betsy Brainerd, Family Place Coordinator for the Arapahoe Libraries, and I am joined by some of my colleagues, the Child Family Library Services team, Mary Kuhner and Lauren Graham. We are all early literacy librarians focused on children ages 0 to 5 and their grown-ups. Within the Arapahoe Library District, we have 5 Family Place libraries, which offer a broad range of support to families with young children. In normal times, one of the main ways we do that is through our parent-child workshops, where we make community experts available to parents to talk about issues like healthy eating, behavior, and speech development. During COVID, though, we've been bringing early childhood experts to you virtually every month. And we have decided that we would like to continue to do that even after we can meet in person. So I do have an initial question for you. We are thinking about holding these parenting strategy sessions at noontime starting in September. And if you would just drop your opinion into the chat box about what time of day works best for you to attend a program like this, we'd appreciate it. And now let me introduce our speaker on the topic of healthy eating, Sue Howk. Sue is a registered dietitian working with Tri-County Health. She has over 21 years of experience providing nutrition education to community members across the lifespan. Her services include community classes, health fairs, lesson plan development, and national, state, and local conference presentations. Sue has been a frequent guest / community expert at our Family Place workshops, and we are thrilled to share her virtually with you today. If you have questions for Sue, please use the Q&A box. And if you are answering the question about best program times, or if you have other technical difficulties, please write about that in the chat box. Welcome, Sue.
Thanks so much, Betsy, and welcome to all of you. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm excited to get to talk with you about planning meals and snacks for your children. And I thought I'd give just a little bit of background about Tri-County Health Department. We have 11 offices serving Adams, Arapahoe, and Douglas counties. And we provide services that include immunizations, child care and restaurant inspections, disease control, health promotion services, and the WIC program that provides food assistance to families with young children. And after this presentation, we'll be sharing some resources with you, and that will include a link to a little bit more information about WIC. And then I'm gonna go on to the next slide here. And so I thought it would be kind of fun just to have you sign in by putting your name in the chat box and then putting in your favorite snack, healthy snack in there. And then I'd love to see kind of what some of you have to say. And then as Betsy mentioned, feel free to add questions into that Q&A box, and I'll be answering them throughout the presentation and definitely at the end as well. So I thought we would start out a little bit by going over some history and kind of how things have changed over the years since our parents and our grandparents were children. And so one of the big things is just when fast food became more available to us. And so, you know, we can see that McDonald's started back in 1948, followed by Burger King and Taco Bell, then Wendy's. And then it's hard to believe Gatorade has been around since the 1960s. And initially it was created by the Florida Gators football team. That's where it gets its name. And it was really meant for those football players who were out on the field sweating and you know, losing a lot of electrolytes. But over the years, it became more of a commercial product. Flavors changed from that original yellow color to many different colors that are more appealing to both us and our children. And so just kind of wanted to put that out there that, you know, when our little kids are running on the soccer field, water is still definitely the best option for them. They don't need necessarily the Gatorade, particularly because it has quite a bit of sugar in there. And then screen time started. It's also crazy to think back in 1975 when Atari first came out with Pong. That is kind of that beginning of the video game and screen time. And then we had Capri Sun introduced in the United States in 1981, which was very popular. It's, you know, it's such a convenient drink. So just kind of, that's when that introduction came, those boxed juice boxes, things like that. Convenience really is driving some of these products. And then Nintendo, as screen time became more and more popular, then we've got Nintendo introducing itself in 1985. I also like to show this slide as it shows what a Happy Meal back in the 1950s. So what we think of a Happy Meal now would have been an adult portion when McDonald's, you know, first started. So it's crazy to look at from the 1950s till now, the size of a soda was 7 ounces versus 42 ounces. And you can even see the size of a hamburger has increased from 3.9 ounces to 12 ounces. And our French fries servings have gone up quite a bit too. So just kind of keeping that in mind and knowing that when we go out to eat, it may be a better option for us even to just go with one of those smaller child-sized meals, because when we look at calories, that really is the size, plenty of calories for us as adults as well. I thought I would kind of talk a little bit about children in Colorado and kind of some of the things we're seeing with their eating and physical activity habits. So children age 1 to 14 who are eating 2 or more fruits a day and 3 or more vegetables a day, kind of hitting what you've probably heard as 5 a day. We all want to strive to eat at least 5 fruits and vegetables a day. But when we look at this, we see that only 11% of children are getting those 5 fruits and vegetables a day, whereas 89% are not. And then the other thing we want to strive for is encouraging our children to be active for at least 60 minutes a day. And so when we look at that breakdown, we have 44%, which is yes, but definitely some work to do to move some of these no's into the yes category. Same with screen time. We're seeing kind of a split here, but more children age 1 to 14 are playing video games and watching TV on a computer for 2 hours per weekday or less. So, you know, we want to strive for more physical activity and less screen time there. So I also thought I would kind of see, and if anyone wants to, I'm going to check in the chat box here really quickly to see what some of you wrote as some of your healthy snacks. Peanut butter on rice cakes is an excellent one. Let's see here, apple slices with peanut butter and crackers, yes, absolutely is a healthy snack. Hummus and crackers also. And I like to see how many of you are mentioning peanut butter or hummus because protein as a snack really helps keep us full. And so it is really a good snack to have. And they also say when we pick a snack, if we can try to pick 2 different food groups, so getting that hummus, which would be from the protein group, and then getting the crackers, which would be from the grains group, is really, really good. So that all looks great. And then does anyone want to take a minute and put in the chat box some of the things you've noticed children eating these days, whether it's healthy or not healthy? Just throw a couple ideas there in the chat box so we can talk about them just a little bit. And as you're doing this, I see there's one question. We are looking for one without palm oil and only ingredients are peanuts and salt. You know, the Adams peanut butter, as you look through, I know there's a lot of peanut butter choices out there, but there are definitely some peanut butters that the only ingredient is peanuts. And you're right, that's what you want to go for. Or if your child has allergies to peanuts, there's a lot of other nut butters out there. And again, to kind of look at the ingredients and try to find the ones that don't have the sugar in them. And so I'm going to see, okay, so yeah, we see a lot of fruit snacks and we see goldfish, Happy Meals. Yeah, Starbucks has really become a popular drink choice, especially because they have all of those, they almost look like milkshakes, some of them, mac and cheese, hot dogs, nuggets, lots of carbs. And one thing I have noticed in different restaurants, some restaurants are starting to have other options for children, but it seemed like for so long, the typical meal for kids was chicken nuggets, mac and cheese, hot dogs, those kinds of things. So I'm always really refreshed when I go into a restaurant and see that their kids' meal includes a salad or includes a fruit cup or, something like that. And also know that it's okay to ask for some of those things in some restaurants. But yeah, it's kind of like we got that typical kids' meal for so many years. And if we're able to kind of start moving away from that and looking to include more fruits and vegetables, that's really a good way to go. So thank you all for sharing in the chat. And then I'm going to go ahead clicking on this slide. So as we saw in an earlier slide, children still need to do better with fruit, but they often do better than they do with vegetables. So fruit is really a good one to offer, and watermelon is a great snack, especially as summertime is coming. And speaking of watermelon, this little boy, it's his birthday, and instead of having cake, it's actually a round piece of watermelon that they've decorated with some fruit as more of a celebration. And so it just kind of shows that we can get creative with some of these things. All of us, when we think of food, we have it in many different ways, and it's part of our celebrations. And how can we do a little twist and have some of these celebrations have some healthy options? Another thing too, when we think about celebrations in schools, of course, we want the kids to be able to celebrate their birthday, but when you have a classroom of 20 to 25 children and everyone's having a birthday, once a week or more than once a week, that could end up to be a lot of cupcakes and cakes. So can we get, kind of creative and do something with fruit? I find that Pinterest has a ton of great ideas. And again, it can be very celebratory, but having some healthier options might be a way to go, at least every once in a while. A lot of our children are getting sources of sugar from the prepackaged things. And I think some of you have put that in the chat, whether it be crackers, cookies, goldfish, any type of prepackaged thing. We want to try to think about doing that, more as a once in a while thing. And then the last picture I have on here, of course, is French fries. And again, not to say that we should never treat ourselves if we enjoy, McDonald's or Wendy's or Burger King every now and again, but thinking about smaller portions and thinking about, limiting the amount of times that we do have French fries and some of those types of foods. Another thing I wanted to mention is just that over the last 25 years, we're seeing more and more children drinking sugar-sweetened beverages. And I wanted to share this next slide. I found it very interesting that when we think about the foods that we buy, added sugar, actually the beverages are overtaking the snacks and sweets. So when we're purchasing foods, about 47% are sugary type beverages and 31% snacks and sweets, which we would expect that, but I just find it very, very interesting. And the thing about beverages is it's really a hidden sugar. We don't always think about how much sugar is in a beverage, whereas we know there's sugar in cookies and candies and things like that. So just this next slide kind of really brings it to home. Whereas if somebody drinks a fruit punch, this 10-ounce fruit punch, they're getting as much sugar that's hidden in there as they would if they ate that many cookies. So I just find this to be kind of a shocking slide because again, we can't see the sugar in the beverage. But as consumers, one thing we can do is use the food label. And the nice thing, over the last couple years, the food label has changed to be easier for us to kind of figure out what's going on inside some of this packaged food. So the calories now, it's a bigger number, you can see it. And then some of the other things are similar, the fat and the cholesterol and all of that. But what I like about it now, if you look at the old label here, you can see sugar shows 12 grams. And now on the new label, it still shows total sugars as 12 grams, but it lets you know how many grams of sugar was added to that product. So you don't need to add those numbers together. It's not 22 grams of sugar, it's still 12 grams, but now we know 10 grams of sugar were added to this product. And the other thing with this, whether it's a beverage or some type of snack, cookies, whatever, if you look at the grams of sugar and you divide that by 4, that gives you a good visual as to how many teaspoons of sugar are in that. So if we look at this product as an example, 12 divided by 4 is 3. So a serving of this product has 3 teaspoons of sugar. And that can be kind of a fun learning thing to do with your family. I've done it in some schools where we scoop out the amount of teaspoons, say in a soda or a Gatorade or a box of Pop-Tarts or something like that. So it's definitely eye-opening and helps to alleviate some of that hidden sugar. Because again, sugar is hidden in the food, but then when we measure it out and see how much sugar is actually in there, it can be very, very eye-opening to us. So I wanted to just take another minute. You know, every day we're making fun memories with our children. And so I thought we'd just take a little time to think back to our childhood and just reflect on a few childhood memories. So the next slide here, I'm going to read these questions slowly, and it's really just more for you to reflect and think about some of these memories. It's often fun to think back to some of our fond food memories that we had with our families. So on this next slide here, I'll just read them, and just as I'm reading them, just kind of think about it. But did you have family meals? And as part of those family meals, did you have like a special meal once a week where you kind of, you know, like on a Friday night or something like that? Did you have to finish your plate? Did you have to eat certain foods before getting dessert? Did your parents prepare different foods for you when you didn't like what was planned for dinner? Did you have the 1-bite rule? Did your parents eat the same food they made for you? And think of a fun physical activity memory that you have from your childhood. And if anybody is comfortable sharing any of those answers, go ahead and put those in the chat box. And then I'm going to kind of watch this here to see, okay, here's a couple people are answering. We almost never went out to eat, almost exclusively all family meals at home. And then yes to family meals, yes to finishing the plate, yes to certain foods before dessert. Sunday nights with my cousins, we watched Disney and ate popcorn. And I bet just like thinking of those things brings back, you know, when I do this in person, I see so many people smiling when they think about some of their childhood food memories. My parents and I worked, if my mom said a few more bites, it was 4 and a couple meant 2. I love it. Did not have to finish our plate. certain foods before dessert. Parents did not make anything different. Yes to the 1 bite rule, and yes to parents eating the same thing. So this is great. And I think, you know, a lot of us have some of these similar memories, but then there's also some foods that probably bring back fond memories to us. Like I mentioned Friday night dinner, we had a restaurant. I grew up in a small town in Michigan called Paw Paw, and we had La Cantina pizza. Not every Friday, but when we would have it, it was a special night. And to this day, I haven't been able to find pizza in Colorado that I love as much as La Cantina pizza. But it could be a combination of, you know, it's really good pizza, but it's also tied to some really special memories that I have as a child. So when I get out to Michigan, always make sure to have some La Cantina pizza. So we'll go ahead and move on here to the next slide. Okay, so I also mentioned the very last question was asking if you have some memories about physical activities, sports that you did as a family, you know, different things like that. And, you know, unfortunately, over this past year, we've been stuck at home a lot, but even on a rainy day, it's nice to have some of these ideas for activities. And again, it's kind of that fun making memories with your kids and your family. And so even if you just have a magazine or a book that has pictures of animals in it, you know, you can just take, even if it's 15 minutes and have your children hop around like a rabbit or flap their arms like a beautiful butterfly. Just kind of acting out some of the animal actions is a fun thing to do. Another nice thing to have on hand are scarves, because when you're in the house, scarves aren't going to break anything, and they're kind of, you know, they float in the air, and you can come up with different things to do with scarves. So that's another nice activity to do with kids. Bean bags are always popular. And then boxes, you know, kids love boxes. We used to joke, you know, when our daughter would get a toy, she'd rather play with a box half the time. So just knowing that there's things around your house that are very simple ways to kind of encourage getting away from some of that screen time and just making some fun memories as a family. And then the other thing, just thinking about meal planning, I really like to use my plate and encourage my plate because I think it's a nice visual when we do our meal planning. And so if you can, and again, I think about when I was a kid, a lot of time the meal was planned around the meat. So it was like maybe meat, potatoes, you know, that kind of thing. Well, if we can plan our meal more around the fruit and vegetable and try to fill half of our plate with fruits and vegetables, that's really going to help us get closer to that 5 servings of fruit and vegetables a day. And even for breakfast, I would challenge you to think about some ways to get some vegetables in. Salsa with eggs is a good way to do that. Omelets with chopped spinach and green and red peppers. You know, there's different things you can do to include some vegetables every now and again in with your breakfast. But you want to try, definitely for lunch and dinner, to fill half of your plate with fruits and vegetables, and then a small serving of grains, about 1/4 of the plate, and that could be brown rice or whole wheat pasta, a roll, a whole wheat piece of bread, as you can see here on the plate. Protein would also be a small portion, about 1/4 of the plate, a nice lean protein like a piece of chicken breast or fish. And also knowing it doesn't always have to be a source that comes from animals. Plant proteins are really good to offer, whether it be black beans. I saw hummus showed up when some of you were mentioning your snacks, peanut butter, things like that. Nut butters are another good source of protein. So just kind of, if you use this My Plate, then you know you've got all the food groups covered when you're doing that meal planning. And so here's just a couple pictures, and this is a small plate, about an 8-inch plate. And so for a 2-year-old, it's about, when it comes to the blueberries and the carrots, it's about 2 tablespoons of blueberries and 2 tablespoons of carrots. And it's a serving for a child is tablespoons per year. So if it was for a 3-year-old, we do 3 tablespoons of each. If it was for a 4-year-old, we do 4 tablespoons of each. But it kind of goes to show that really portion sizes for our young toddlers is quite small. And the amount here of the Cheerios in the picture is going to be more like just a small 1/4 of a cup. You can see it's only a half of an egg there. The black beans are about a 1/4 of a cup. So it just gives you an idea for a 2-year-old, because what we find for some kids, if we give them a large plate and we put more of like adult sized portions on their plate, it can overwhelm them and they may not want to eat it all. And so if you're having any struggles with kids at meal times, wanting maybe not wanting to eat, it could just be the amount of food on the plate. So kind of keeping some of those things in mind. And then what I want to do is get into a little bit of a discussion on responsive feeding. And again, when we share those resources with you, there's going to be a link to Ellen Satter Institute. She really gets into explaining the division of responsibility, which kind of talks about, as parents and caregivers, our responsibility is for what to feed our children, when and where, and our child is responsible for how much they're going to eat and whether or not they're going to eat at all. And that can be challenging for us as parents because we want our children to eat and grow well and get all the nutrition that they need. But we also want to take a step back and make sure that we're not forcing the issue during meal times and causing for, possibly some battles and different things like that at the dinner table. Jill Castle also has some good information on this. So we'll make sure that her resources is going to be in that resource list as well. And then as a caregiver, so then, we know what healthy foods are. So it's our job to choose and prepare those healthy foods for our children, provide regular meals and snacks. Children do very well with routine. So the more their expectations and they know, we're going to have breakfast, lunch, dinner, and sit together as a family at dinner time, whatever your routine is, they do very well with meals. And you want to, have a nice, pleasant eating experience during your meal times. The other thing, some children want to graze on food throughout the day where they're just having kind of little snacks. What that can do, they can fill their little bellies and then not have room for the next meal. And they might graze on enough food to keep them full, but not to provide enough nutrition. So it's really much better to have those structured meal times: breakfast, snack, lunch, snack, dinner, and possibly a snack in between dinner and bedtime. And you want to have about 2 hours in between each one of those meals and snacks. So our children's eating jobs, just know they will eat the amount that they need. They will eat a variety of food with time, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. They will grow predictably. And along those lines, when you go into the pediatrician and have their checkups, don't be afraid to ask to see their growth charts. Because, if they're following their growth curves well, that can give you peace of mind that they're eating and doing what they need to do. So, and they'll kind of follow a growth pattern. So making sure to ask the doctor about that when you're in. And then, again, with that structure, they learn to behave well at the table. This kind of goes over an example of what responsive feeding would look like. So the parent offers a bite of food and their child opens their mouth and accepts the food. Then the parent offers another bite of food and a child might look away and shut their mouth. And so then the parent waits and smiles and offers some finger food. And then instead of the parent feeding the child that food, the child picks up the food and eats. So that's just showing like the parent is being responsive. They saw that their child looked away, shut their mouth. So they tried something different. The next slide shows what we wouldn't want to do, which is the non-responsive feeding. So, they're offering the bite, the child takes that first bite of food, and then when the parent offers the second bite and the child looks away, this time the parent holds the child's mouth open and puts the food in their mouth, and the child cries and spits out the food. So you can see what a difference that makes for a negative experience. And as we get into the development of our children, and you'll kind of see why, especially at 2 years old, they start becoming more independent and wanting to do this on their own versus having their parents feed them. A couple more things. I can't say enough about structure. Children do very well with structure. So routine meals, snacks that are healthy and trying to be from 2 different food groups, the location and the timing. Just the more predictable you make this for children, the better. Making sure that you have the boundaries set so that healthy foods are offered. You're in charge of buying the food and the food decisions in the kitchen, but the child is the one that decides whether or not he or she will eat. And oftentimes too, when you're preparing their plate, you're going to know some of their favorite foods and maybe some foods that haven't been so popular. And not to say that we want to waste any food, but say that, they haven't been real fond of black beans. You might put just a very small amount of black beans on their plate because that allows them to get more and more familiar with seeing that, more and more familiar with seeing you eat those types of foods. And then of course, having other types of foods on the plate too. Some of the foods that are some of their favorites and some of the foods that are somewhat new to them. And if your child is still hungry and wants seconds, then that's certainly okay. Especially because we are going to be trying to put less food on the plate depending on their age. And so they might be going through a growth spurt and ask you for a little bit more food. This is one thing that all of us have seen. We've all seen this face, and we assume the child doesn't like the food when they make this face. But at about age 2, what happens is this is a very typical fear called neophobia, and it's the fear of something new. And so when you see that face, you don't necessarily want to give up on that food. It can take 10 to 15 exposures to the food. That doesn't even mean the food goes in the mouth, but just seeing the food and being exposed to the food 10 to 15 times, and then even more before the child is willing to try the food. So just knowing that, and kind of if we think about ourselves, if we went to a foreign country and we were served food that we've never eaten before, we're probably not going to put that in our mouth immediately. And when we think about children, they're exposed to so many new things, and they're going to have some fear of that. And just knowing that if they're poking at it or smelling it, they're not necessarily playing with their food, but they're becoming more familiar with their food. And that really helps them be more accepting of it as time goes on. So having some patience and knowing this is normal, especially because of neophobia. All right. This kind of reinforces what I just said about the repeated neutral exposures. And what a neutral exposure is you're not saying, oh, try this or try that, but you're letting them see it on their plate. You're letting them touch it, pick it up, like this little guy has a blueberry stuck to his finger. Their interest might not be immediate. They might just look at it, but not taste it. They might taste it, but then spit it out and not swallow it. They might swallow it, but not want any more. And those are all typical things. Exposure makes new food more familiar. So that's kind of our goal, is just to get them more and more familiar with food, knowing that it can take 10 to 15 even for them to be willing to taste a new food. Children do best in a responsive feeding environment when they have an opportunity to transition from one thing to another. when we have good role models. So they really do, as they see us eating certain foods, that helps them to become braver and be willing to try new foods. And then having that predictable routine is important. Sometimes as we're observing our children, their food intake may appear very erratic to us. And so they might eat a lot one day or during one meal and then not eat much the next day. One child might eat more or less than another child. So it's also important not to compare our children to other children or even siblings because they can be very different. And so that's just important. Children, well, babies are born with a good sense of hunger cues. Over time, when we're encouraged to finish our plate or, then we start to lose that sense of our hunger cues. So children are actually better at it than we are, and we don't want to disturb that. So when they say they're full and they don't want any more and they still have half a plate of food, that's perfectly fine. And that's the next point. They don't necessarily clean their plates or eat a standard portion, and they'll stop when they're full, even if they haven't eaten that much. And knowing it's unpredictable when your child's going to have a growth spurt. So then there'll be times where they want to eat a lot. So it's kind of an up and down thing, which I think, again, is challenging to us parents because we want to know that they're eating well and getting the nutrition they need. But to really take a step back and listen to what they're telling us is definitely important. I wanted to put this in here as everyday life. If we can include talking about nutrition and fruits and vegetables with our children when we're reading stories, if we can pick some stories that talk about healthy eating, even just talk about harvesting apples, or the hungry caterpillar is a great one. You can tell your child that the apples and the pears and the plums and the strawberries are all fruits, and then you can ask them to tell you some more fruits, and it can be a learning experience. And when the caterpillar eats the green leaf, you can talk about eating salad or leafy greens. Maybe there's, if you do smoothies with your children, just having some kind of a milk or milk alternative with a banana and spinach in there. It's really good, and you don't taste the spinach, you mostly taste the banana. It's kind of a nice way to get some vegetables in your child. And instead of calling it a spinach smoothie, you call it the green monster smoothie. It makes it just fun and lighthearted for kids. And I have my hungry caterpillar stuffed animal here. I grabbed it just to kind of also mention that toys can be a good way to bring nutrition in. Some kids have the kitchens, and making sure that you have some plastic fruits and vegetables and bowls so they can make their own little fruit salad and their own little vegetable salad. So kind of working in some of those conversations is really good. I'm going to take a peek here.
You did have one question in the chat box, and we could save it for later, or you can answer it now if you'd like.
I think I will answer it now.
Okay.
Let's see here.
It says, what happens if they say they are full, but then they request dessert 10 minutes later?
This is perfect. So, say you've offered dinner. Well, I'll kind of mention how the whole day might play out. So say, as a parent, you're going to offer breakfast snack, lunch snack, dinner, and maybe a bedtime snack. And they eat a really good breakfast. They eat their snack for mid-morning, and then at lunchtime they don't really eat much. They're distracted and they want to go play or whatever. Then you would excuse them from the table, but knowing you're not going to give them any other food until the next snack time, which is mid-afternoon. And that next snack time, again, as a parent, you get to decide what that snack is going to be. It doesn't have to be dessert. It could be, but it could be something they enjoy, apples and peanut butter or whatever. Same kind of thing with dinner. Say you offer dinner and they don't eat much dinner and they ask for this, and you can just say, you know, we just finished dinner. We're not going to have anything right now. We'll go ahead and have your bedtime snack at such and such a time. And the other thing along those lines, say that they don't eat dinner and they don't have a snack before bed, and they start having a little bit of that hunger feeling when they go to bed. That's actually not a bad thing, because they're not going to starve, but they're going to realize, oh, when my parents feed me, I should eat it. Otherwise, I'm going to have this hungry feeling. And so if there are some days where they refuse, you don't want to make them something special, or necessarily if they request dessert right away, give into it. But just the more they know those limits, like if I don't eat dinner, I'm not going to ask for dessert because I know I'm not going to get it, you know, that kind of thing. But knowing that if they skip a meal, it's okay. And it's actually a learning experience for them. And they may be like, oh, I don't like that hungry feeling. So tomorrow when mom gives me dinner, I'm going to eat it. So it's kind of, but it's definitely a work in process. And then there's, looks like underneath that question, I wonder if there's a time when children can tell that the grown-up wants them to eat more, and so they eat even if they're full. Social pressure to clear their plate mentally, even if it's just a few bites. Their grown-up will be happier if they eat so many bites, so they eat even if they don't want to. Yes, so that is a real good one. And that's a reason why we don't want to say, oh, will you take another bite for me? Or, oh, you know, this is really good for you. You don't necessarily want to push it, because children do want to please us as parents. And because they're so pleasing, they might do that where they're going to eat even if they're not hungry. So we'll talk a little bit. I've got a couple more slides to talk about that, but we can loop back around this at the end if I don't completely answer that. Okay, perfect. So then we'll go ahead and click to the next slide. So this one kind of goes, yeah, it's all along those same lines where this is more of that forceful type of eating. And I even think some of these children pictured here are pretty old, so certainly they don't need to be fed. But I think the parents are, you know, just wanting them to eat some of their vegetables or whatever it is, and clearly they don't want it. And so again, if they're done, it's okay for them to be done. This I think is interesting and may help with some of the questions you're having, depending on how old your child is. When we think about their development, it can explain why they're behaving some of the ways that they're behaving. So for example, if your child is 18 months to 2 years old, they get distracted very easily, and perhaps because of that, eat less. And so this is a good reason why you wouldn't want the TV on in the background, because they can very easily be distracted and forget about eating. So the more you can eat at the table in the kitchen and have less distractions, the better it's going to be for them to eat. They already do start having some favorite foods at this age. They like routine, and they like to eat with their hands. So letting them do that, that's part of their exploration in learning how to eat. And when it comes to young toddlers, eating can be very messy, but it's going to make for a healthy relationship with food. And they're at the point where they like to start trying different types of textures. Then when we go on to 2 to 3 year olds, this is where we get into some of those battles at the dinner table, because they are starting to insist on doing things on their own. And again, we know it might be messy. They might make a mess. We might want to still be the one to feed them. And we really should take a step back and allow them to eat themselves once they're 2 years old. They might dawdle during meal times. They're going to tell you whether they like the food or not. They're going to have definite likes and dislikes. They're going to have food jags where there's certain foods they just aren't going to eat for a while. Can't say enough about routine. Routine is also important for this age group, and really for all age groups. They're able to hold a glass, but they're probably going to spill a lot. They're able to chew more types of foods, because sometimes I'll have parents ask me about meat, and their child will chew on the meat, but they'll get tired of chewing on it and they'll spit it out. And that's still, as they get older into this 2 to 3 year old age, they're going to be able to chew more foods and do better, versus our 18 month to 2 year olds might have more trouble chewing some types of meats. And that's where some of the plant-based proteins might come in if your child's having trouble, chewing meat. And at 2 to 3 years old, they like to start helping in the kitchen. And so if they help you put the fruit in the basket or in the bowl or whatever, they might be more willing to eat it because they're proud of making some of the contributing to the meal. Then once we get to 3 to 4 year olds, we, all of the commercials on TV that we see, all the cereal commercials and all of the juice box commercials, and they're influenced by TV. So just knowing that and knowing that if you're at the grocery store, they're going to remember some of those sugary cereals that they saw on TV and ask for it. So they are very influenced by that. But they also like to imitate you as the cook. So allowing them in the kitchen and having some fun together, it's a good, fun age to do that. They're going to start requesting their favorite food, which is perfectly fine. So, kind of having them help you with some of their favorite foods, and then having, again, trying to follow that My Plate where they are having the fruit, vegetable, grain, and protein on the plate, but it's fun to include some of their favorites on there. They're going to have an increased appetite and interest in food. They're able to pour liquids from a small pitcher, use a fork, and at this point, they're really doing pretty good chewing most foods. Then with our 4 to 5 year olds, a lot of times now they're starting preschool or they're learning from older siblings. They're going to be influenced. So you might start hearing, oh, I don't like that. And it could be because they saw someone at school not say ew and not want to eat that. So they're influenced more. But they also might be interested at the dinner table talking more than eating because they're excited about their day or whatever. So just knowing that this is all typical development. And then the fun thing too is they can discuss different comparisons. So going back to what's on their plate, instead of saying, oh, those strawberries are really good for you, make sure you eat some, to say, oh, what color is that strawberry? And if they do take a bite, oh, how does that taste to you? What's the texture? You can get into more of that sensory discussion. And of course, they're able to construct sentences and all of that. They're going to continue to have some food jags. So there's going to be some foods that they're going to refuse for a while. And again, that's typical. They're going to be interested though where food comes from. So if you're able to, grow some strawberries in a little pot in your backyard or on your porch, or tomatoes or whatever, it's really, kids really enjoy some little gardening, even if it's growing a little herb in your kitchen. They're able to use knives and forks, able to use a cup well, and they really have that ability to feed themselves. And they definitely like to help prepare food. So just those are some kind of as you go along. And if your child is behaving a certain way, hopefully this kind of gives you an explanation as to why they're doing that. And it's just part of the developmental stage that they're in. So some strategies to increase the adventurous eating, use that My Plate as a guide. Keep your portions small and age appropriate so it doesn't overwhelm your child when they're at the dinner table, because you can see this little boy, he's just got way too much food on his plate and he's just overwhelmed. But as children are able to pour and help in the kitchen, definitely involve them, and keeping mealtime conversations about food around sensory descriptions. So again, that helps alleviate that trying to please us by eating things, but having more of a discussion around food and talking about the textures and things like that will help children be more interested in certain foods. in your resource list, so this Ellen Satter Institute will be something that I encourage you to take a peek at. It really gets into that division of responsibility and why that's really helpful and will help your job be easier in the long run if you set those, if you are the responsible one for what and the when and the where, and child is responsible on if he's going to eat or not. She really gets into some good detail on that. And Jill Castle, she has a podcast and I think a TED Talk on the link that I put in there. So something to check out. This is this crookneck squash row is it's more of a curriculum, but anyone that goes to the website can look at these curriculums, and that might just be a fun thing, especially if you're thinking about gardening with your children. So those will be resources that will be shared with you. And I am now at the end of my presentation, but would love, I'm going to peek in the chat box again here and see if there's any more questions. Okay.
Now is the time for people to put their questions into either, I guess, either the chat box or the Q&A box, either one.
Oh, yes, sorry, I've been looking at chat. But if there's some
No, I
questions,
didn't see anything in the Q&A box yet. Either one is fine. Give people a minute.
and if any of the questions you asked earlier, if you want a little bit more explanation, let me know. But yeah, definitely the more pleasant you can make mealtime and the more routine. So here we go. Any advice for addressing unhealthy foods that parents are giving to our children? So one thing with that, really, all foods are okay for our kids to eat. We have some foods that are more all the time foods, like the fruits and vegetables, and some foods that are more just once in a while foods. So it may be just if you know they're going to grandparents' house, just saying, you know, if you're going to give them their favorite treat, please limit it to once, you know, that kind of thing. I think kids start to get that expectation when they go to grandma and grandpa's, they're going to get a certain treat if that's kind of the routine they've set. And we don't necessarily want to make any food a villain, because even like as adults, if we tell ourselves we cannot have that piece of chocolate cake, the more we tell ourselves we can't have it, the more we want it. So just know that it is okay for them to have some of those things, but not a bad idea to just have that conversation with grandparents saying, well, I really don't want them to have that much sugar. So if you're going to give it to them, please just do it, you know, right after dinner or once a day or something like that. You could also share some of the information, like if they look at the grams of sugar and divide it by 4, they can see actually how many teaspoons of sugar they're getting, and that, you know, it's really not good for them to have a lot of sugar, and to encourage them to limit it, just like you're limiting it in your daily routine. And then
there's a question in the Q&A.
Oh, okay, what's that, Betsy?
Do you have ideas for calcium for kids when they can't have dairy?
Yes. So my daughter actually cannot have dairy. It really upsets her stomach. So she does do some milk alternatives, but you want to be cautious with, say, almond milk. When you look at the nutrition label, some almond milk has very little calcium in it. So you want to take a look at the different milk alternatives and find some that have a fair amount of calcium. So definitely the food label is going to be your friend. Some other foods like broccoli, spinach, that actually has some calcium in it. So if you can do a smoothie with, again, a non-dairy alternative with the bananas and the spinach, that's a way to get some calcium in. If you are offering orange juice every once in a while, and with juice, it should only be about 4 ounces or less when you do give them a serving of juice. Some of them are calcium fortified. But yeah, just kind of really paying attention to the labels, and you'll be surprised. Some almonds actually have calcium in them. So looking for some of those alternatives is a good way to go. Okay, and then we have a question here. assuming all the things you mentioned sound for typical development of young children. One of my kiddos is on the spectrum, much more hesitant about trying new foods, very particular about textures, hard to get him to eat. So also on the resource list, there's some resources on child development, and just knowing that if your child, if their eating behaviors are causing you some concerns, there could be some developmental things going on where it hurts to swallow. Some kids need to have swallow studies done. Some have issues with their bowels where it hurts to go to the bathroom. There's definitely a lot of different things that can happen. So you're absolutely right. What I talked about here is the typical, the typical routine we see. But if there's anything alarming to you, some kids do need occupational therapy or physical therapy to help them with eating. So if you're noticing anything at all that's concerning, talk to your doctor. And then also you might want to check out some of the developmental resources that we'll be sharing at the end of the presentation. So thank you for sure for bringing that up. Food. Oh, go ahead, Betsy. What's the other?
Sorry, in Q&A, it's how important are snacks? My child is a much better eater in general at set meal times without, and we very rarely have set snacks.
So again, all children are different. So when you go to the doctor, if they're growing well and getting plenty of their nutrition in the breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and you don't need to do snacks, you don't have to. It's not a requirement. It is kind of a nice backup plan to have if they don't eat that meal and you don't, you feel bad like, oh, they're going to go hours and hours and hours without eating. But if it's working for you, it's perfectly fine. Hacks for working families. There's nothing wrong with having some of your meals be convenient meals. But when I think about my plate and I think about not worrying about the meat as the center of the meal and thinking about it's very easy to rinse off some grapes and to steam a little broccoli, half your meal is already made and it's pretty quick. And then maybe you do have just a small piece of cut up chicken that you prepared on the weekend. The grains can be very simple. It doesn't have to be meals that you spend a lot of time on. So just thinking about how you can save time with centering the meal more around fruits and vegetables.
That's great. Any other questions? Okay. Well, Sue, as always, you've given us a lot of practical advice and helpful information. Thank you so much. As I did write in the chat, oh, do we get another question here? Oh, we do. Do you have time? We have time for one more. My daughter hates cleanup after a meal. Any ideas to make this more enjoyable for all of us?
Ooh, cleanup. That's an interesting question. I don't like cleanup either. So, but I think, making it, if you're allowing her to help with preparing mealtime, maybe coming up with, oh gosh, that one's got me a little bit stumped. I would say if you can talk or sing or tell stories when you're doing cleanup to try to make it fun, going back to thinking about childhood memories and what might make it kind of fun, but I know none of us really like to clean up. So that's a great question. But a good one. And I think it's wonderful that you involve them in the cleanup too. So that's setting a good habit. So I say keep doing it even if they don't love it, but maybe you can make it fun with a song or some music in the background or something.
Good advice.
Perfect. We turn music on when we wash the dishes. There, I love it.
My mother is always telling me that she and her sister used to sing duets when they washed the dishes, and she remembers it all these years later. It was one of her favorite times.
Nice. I love it.
Mm-hmm. All right, everyone. Thanks very much for joining us, and thanks again to Sue for being here. Next month's program is on Tuesday, June 15th, and we'll have Nikki Fitch from Early Intervention walk us through the evaluation process and tell us what services are available through Child Find. On the screen, you'll see that we're cross-promoting a program, a music program that's Tuesday, June 1st. So that might be something fun for you to tune into as well. And as always, if you have any questions at all about library books or services, don't hesitate to ask a librarian by clicking on that box on our website. Thanks, everyone. Thanks again, Sue.
Thanks for having me. I enjoyed it. Well, I was happy with the questions we got. That was great.
Yeah, that was good.
And then you ended up getting those emails okay from me, Betsy, with the links.
Yes.
Okay.
Now
great.
I can send those resources directly to the people. And I was also going to link them in the blog post, and that probably will go up next week.